that story was true. So why has the White House and the president been bending over backwards to like gin up some kind of bottled outrage about this? Well, you may remember this guy. Steve Bannon was the head of the right-wing blog Breitbart, and then he leaped from there to be CEO of the Trump campaign. Then he was a senior advisor at the White House, and then, God, who even remembers what happened to him there and why he had to go. But before all of that, Steve Bannon's previous career was that he was a ham-handed, super over-the-top right-wing filmmaker. His films included one that tried to make Sarah Palin into an object of national veneration. There was also this really weird one where Bannon tried to make the case that the old guy from Duck Dynasty was maybe like a prophet, like kind of a new Jesus or something. See what I mean? It's hard to figure out. It has been a weird ride for old Steve Bannon. But along the way, Mr. Bannon has picked up acolytes, including, apparently, this man, Michael Pack, who has also made a career out of making right-wing movies. He describes Steve Bannon as his mentor. And this is the guy who Trump nominated, the guy who says Steve Bannon is his mentor, who spent his own career making weird right-wing movies of his own about things like the tyranny of the gays on college campuses and how white male Christians are the only people who are really discriminated against anymore. President Trump has nominated that guy, the Bannon acolyte guy who makes the anti-gay documentaries about the oppression of Christians. President Trump has nominated him, Michael Pack, to take over the agency that oversees Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Middle East Broadcasting Network, and all the rest. Now, it is widely perceived in Washington that the president started attacking Voice of America and calling them disgusting and denouncing them literally as communists. Not because of anything particularly interesting or outre that VOA had done. They've kind of just been doing the things they always do. It's widely believed in Washington that the president started mounting that criticism of Voice of America because he wanted to goose momentum to get that guy's nomination through, to get his guy installed as the head of the agency that oversees all of these broadcast networks. Among other things, I should tell you, the White House criticism of Voice of America led the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control of all places, to formally blacklist Voice of America reporters so they could no longer get interviews with CDC officials. I mean, think about that, right? The president and the White House start denouncing Voice of America because they want to get this guy in there. They want to create some controversy and get their new guy in there. The denunciations of Voice of America end up resonating at Centers for Disease Control. I mean, the fact that the CDC has time to play these kind of reindeer games in the middle of a freaking pandemic that has killed nearly 120,000 Americans already kind of tells you what the CDC has been reduced to in this administration, right? At a time when it's supposed to be the premier public health agency, not only in the country, but in the world, it's instead spending its time blacklisting Voice of America reporters so they can't get CDC official interviews anymore because the White House says they're communists. That's the CDC doing that. Seriously. It's just incredible. But the White House criticism, the president's criticism, all this effort to goose interest in this agency, to boost the momentum for this Bannon acolyte who the president wanted to take over all these networks, it worked. Senate Republicans dutifully obliged. And even though Michael Pack's nomination had been languishing for a very long time, he was confirmed a couple of weeks ago. And so now he's in there, and immediately upon arriving, he's just fired everyone there. He's fired the heads of all of those networks. He's also just fired all the boards of directors that advised all those networks. So the way these things work, the structure has changed a little bit over the years in terms of where all these agencies are headquartered and how exactly who reports to who. But basically, they're advised, these networks are advised by senior and bipartisan people who are experienced in journalism and diplomacy. That has been true from the very beginning. He's just fired all of those people in all of those advisory roles for all of the networks, and he has replaced them with a hand-picked bunch of winners. For example, an anti-transgender activist who writes for a right-wing blog, also an anti-gay activist lawyer, also an advisor to Ben Carson, who already has a full-time job in the government, and somebody who also works full-time in Mick Mulvaney's office. Also, he named himself, Michael Pack picked himself to be the chairman of all of those boards. advising all of those networks, where he's just fired all of the heads of the networks and fired everybody who was advising them and put in his little club full of Cub Scouts who he handpicked to advise them instead. None of the people who he has picked to be on these boards advising these networks have any journalism experience whatsoever, or any State Department experience, any diplomacy experience, anything.